How to organize a burial for your loved one. When it comes to organizing your loved one's final arrangements, you will need to make a decision on burial or cremation. Perhaps your loved one has told you that they prefer burial. Alternatively, you may have to make that choice for them. If your loved one has not pre purchased their grave, you will need to choose both the cemetery and the grave. If you know which cemetery they wanted to be buried in, then call the cemetery and make an appointment to meet with a consultant to choose a grave. This is best done before going ahead with any funeral arrangements where you've selected the time and date of the funeral. Some cemeteries will only allow you to purchase a grave for an at need burial, while some will allow you to prepay. And if you know that you're going to be needing a grave in the near future, and you're trying to prepare, it's probably best to contact the cemetery and make some inquiries. There may be some reasons in which you don't want to go to a cemetery to choose a grave, and yet you still need one. And if you don't want to do that, please let the funeral director know because they can ask the cemetery to allocate a grave for you in a particular area. If you choose this option, you will not get a choice of grave, and the cemetery will choose the most convenient grave in which to bury your loved one. Cemeteries may have different fees, so please consider this when making a decision on which cemetery you'll choose. A grave is a grave, but they vary in what sort of memorialization they can have. Let me run you through them. Some cemeteries may have a natural burial area where maintaining the natural environment is valued. Burials in this area have very strict standards. The deceased must be buried either without a coffin and may be wrapped in a shroud instead, or the coffin must be made of certain biodegradable materials. Your loved one must be dressed in all natural fiber clothing in these areas, and any memorialization will be minimal, if at all allowed. If this is what your loved one would have wanted or did want, please explore which cemeteries offer this kind of burial. There are a few in Melbourne and Victoria, and for some members of community, it really seems to resonate well with the loved one's concern for the environment. At the cemetery, you may be asked what kind of memorialization you would like, and this can cause a lot of confusion. This could range from a headstone, plaque and granite grave, or just plaque, or monumental. Headstone on beam graves are where graves are in rows. The beam refers to a concrete strip on which the headstone sits at the top of a grave. Headstone in lawn graves refer to graves which are situated in a lawn or around a garden, and instead of being in rows, this area will literally look like grass or garden. With these graves, there will be a specified area around the grave on which to place a foundation to support the headstone, and you will need to source the headstone through a monumental mason. The mason will work with you to discuss a customized headstone for your loved one's name and other details to appear. Headstones allow you more creativity with choices ranging from simple angled headstones or upright headstones to all kinds of designs, which can be angels draped over granite, photos etched into the granite, or even shaped like golf bags and helmets, motorbike helmets. You can get really creative here in your design, and an experienced mason will give you all the options so that you can customize it to really reflect your loved one's life. Headstones can also have plaques attached, or they may have sandblasted emblems, things like crosses, musical instruments, whatever you like, really. Again, get really creative with this. There's some gorgeous headstones in cemeteries these days. And a great idea is to plan a day where you can walk around established areas within a cemetery and take note of what you like to give you some ideas. And be aware that cemeteries may have specifications in a particular area for the headstone and where the headstone can be placed, maximum height and width, etc. And the mason will have to provide a plan to the cemetery to have the work approved and a permit issued to carry out the work. When it comes to choosing a mason, again, if you look around the cemetery at some of the headstones, they will usually have the mason's name on the headstone and the phone number so that you can make a short list or contact whoever you want to. Also, check the reviews online. And there may be quite a fee difference between one and another. So, if this is important to you, then do some research and meet with a few of them. A monumental grave is where the grave has a concrete foundation around the whole grave where the granite will sit. The whole grave may be covered in a granite top, whereas lawn graves cannot have anything placed on the lawn. Some families prefer this because they don't like the idea of a grave being walked on. And some families will use a monument because that's what their family or cultural tradition dictates. Again, you may have specifications to adhere to from the cemetery about height and width, etc. The mason will be able to advise on that and what you're allowed to have. As with a headstone, be creative within the specifications and walk around the cemetery to see what you like in color, shape, inscription, and other customized elements. Once you have a monument in place covering the grave after the first burial, if there is a second burial or perhaps a third burial in that grave, you will also have to factor in the fee to remove the ledger, which is the top of the grave, the horizontal part, which covers the actual burial. Check with the cemetery on those fees. So I'm jumping ahead here. You will not need to organize a mason if you're organizing a funeral and if you're just trying to pick a grave, but it is important to factor in the costs that you'll incur down the track when you do come to make the monument or headstone. And the final type of grave that you may encounter is a lawn grave with a plaque and granite as the memorialization. Alternatively, it may just be a plaque. You might have the choice of just a plaque. Some cemeteries will want you to have granite where a bronze plaque sits, and some will allow you to place the plaque straight onto the ground or lawn or on the concrete beam, which runs along the head end of the grave. Using granite, if you have a choice, is a great idea for the longevity of the plaque, as it may be less likely to be damaged by lawnmowers and whippersnippers. Usually, there will be a choice of plaques that you can have, and you'll need to consider how many plaques you can have to commemorate each person and how many you will need to commemorate each person. There are also plaques which can accommodate up to 6 people, which is ideal if you're placing cremated remains into a grave as well as burials, or perhaps just cremated remains instead of burials. These plaques, as shown, has one large plaque and several smaller plaques which are attached for each person as required. Plaque and granite is usually the most economical method of memorialization and the most simple and humble. And usually the cemetery can help with organizing the plaque and granite. You can organize your own mason, but just be aware that they will have to include permit fees into your fee, so please compare prices. It's sometimes a lot simpler to organize it through the cemetery. These are the acknowledgements for the photos I've used, and I also wish to acknowledge Arrow Bronze. And I hope you have enjoyed this little presentation on what type of graves you might encounter. Thanks for watching.